Well, if anybody's ever asked, is there an association that helps the oil and gas workers? Well, let's talk about that and much more on this episode of The Crude Truth.
In 1901, at Spindletop Hill near Beaumont, the future of Texas changed dramatically as, like a fountain of fortune, thousands of barrels of oil burst from the earth towards the sky. Soon, Detroit would be cranking out Model Ts by the millions, and America was on the move, thanks to the black gold being produced in Texas. Now, more than a century later, the vehicles are different, but nothing else has truly changed. Sure, there may be many other alternative energy sources like wind and solar and electric. But let's be honest, America depends on oil and entrepreneurs, and if the USA is truly going to be independent, it has to know the crude truth.
This episode of The Crude Truth is brought to you by Oil and Gas Workers Association, Sandstone Group, Air Compressor Solutions, Basin Fluids, and the Fuel Pros.
Well, I'm just excited to be here again today on another episode of The Crude Truth. If you have noticed in my beginning and end of my sponsors, I've added a couple of new sponsors for this year in 2023. And one of them, I'm excited to say, is the Oil and Gas Workers Association, headquartered out of Midland. And today I have the president, Matt Coady, and one of the newest members, Prater Benson, with me today. Gentlemen, how are y'all doing?
Doing good. Doing great, Ray. Thank you for having us in studio.
No, thank you for coming in. I know we tried to get on before the end of the year, there in December, and unfortunately our schedules just did not sync up right. But I'm excited that you came all the way from West Texas to Fort Worth today, and I'm sure you probably got other things lined up too while you're here.
Well, of course, but I didn't expect to come in and see such a beautiful studio. This is fantastic.
Oh, thank y'all so much. We appreciate it. We like the studio that we use, and we shout out to definitely our team there at Real News Communications that help us out with this studio every day. Right, Wime?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Andrew knows what I'm talking about. And for those of y'all in the background that are listening, don't see, that's Andrew Wime, my producer in the background there. So, Andrew, say hi real quick.
How's it going, everyone?
Thank you, Andrew. And we're off to a great start here in 2023, gentlemen. How's everything looking? And first and foremost, let's start off before I ask how's everything looking. To everybody out there, what is the Oil and Gas Workers Association?
OGWA is an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit trade association working to secure, grow, and sustain American oil and gas jobs and fighting for American workers.
In a nutshell.
That was it. That's the elevator speech. We didn't even have to be on an elevator.
Well, shoot, we can go find one when we walk down the hall and get that elevator if we need to do it. But that's it in a nutshell. But come on, let's dive into it a little bit.
Sure.
What are you guys doing? What have y'all done? And what are y'all looking to do in the future?
We're a lobbying organization. We work a little bit through education, but mostly we're focused on legislation and fighting back against unnecessary and costly regulations that hurt our jobs and our families, our economy, and our national security.
Oh, well, it is true that, our national security is, I think, one of the top things on every American's mind. And you know what, with us not having the strategic petroleum reserve where it needs to be, I think a lot of people don't feel that secure as we were. And of course, during the last administration, we were energy independent for the most part, or more importantly, I think a better word to say was secure, that we were definitely energy secure. And this administration just seems to only continue to cut down on the actual workers in the oil and gas industry. And in fact, I think on my LinkedIn for the Crude Truth just a couple of weeks ago, I brought that up, that this administration admitted that they lost thousands of jobs for the American people when they cut out the Keystone Pipeline. I think I tagged the Oil and Gas Workers Association and all that, if I'm correct.
You did. Thank you. And we're glad to have that admission. We all knew it at the time. And when you look at policies that this administration is rolling out right now, we don't want to wait till 2 years down the line for them to admit they're wrong. We know they're wrong now. Look at the methane emissions rules that Joe Biden's EPA is rolling out. Look at the ruling from the Fish and Wildlife Service to postpone the implementation of the lesser prairie chicken designation on the ESA until March 27th. Now, that gives farmers and ranchers a little more time to get into conservation programs, but it also gives the administration more time to reconsider that ruling.
Really? Wow, I did not know that. I didn't know that the prairie chicken was still an important guy out there. And
Yeah, they are sticking them on a chicken. And we asked this very unscientific poll, which is more endangered, the American oil and gas worker or that lesser prairie chicken? And more scientific people than me have been following lesser prairie chicken in their natural habitat for years. They know things that this administration is not willing to admit now, that lesser prairie chicken doesn't need to be on the endangered or even threatened list.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I've said it here before, and Prater, I think you'd probably agree with me that all oil and gas and the majority of the individuals that work in the oil and gas industry are conservationists. We love nature. We're outdoorsmen. We're hunters. We're fishers. And so you don't see us tearing up the land in a way that's going to harm things. Would you agree to that?
Absolutely. I mean, you have, I'm going to put quotes, the other side that's, we pollute, we disrupt the drilling, the fracking, the earthquakes, right?
Right.
Which, I could go into that, but I'll back off. I'll backpedal on that one. We're hunters, we're fishermen, we're conservationists, so we respect the land.
Yeah. Now, Prater, tell us a little bit about your background. Now, of course, the Oil and Gas Workers Association is part of your passion, you drive, but you do have a 9 to 5. So tell us a little about what you do on a daily basis and what you're doing with the Oil and Gas Workers Association.
I work for Work Strings International. I'm one of their corporate sales. I'm on the U.S. land, so I focus on just drill pipe, mainly the Permian Basin. Work Strings is very big in the Gulf of Mexico market, as well as just the international market. That's mainly where our name is, but our name is growing rapidly on the U.S. land side.
Okay.
I got into the industry in 2017. I'm from the DFW area. Went to high school in Plano. My folks live in Prosper. As far as Oil and Gas Workers Association, new member on the board. Also on the board of the AADE chapter of Permian Basin.
Okay.
So I'm very pro oil and gas and want to not just take a paycheck from the industry, but give back to these nonprofits.
Well, that's the important part, and I think that's why we do it. And it's one thing that my father has instilled in us. Like, you always got to be giving back.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt, you and I know each other. I feel like we've known each other a lot longer than we have. But for the listeners out there of the CRUDE Truth, tell us about yourself and where you're at and where you've been and where the Oil and Gas Workers Association is going.
Boy, that's a long-winded story, but you want to go all the way back to 1986?
I don't know.
That's the first bust that I remember. I was 9. I was the oldest of 3 kids. My dad worked wireline for Schlumberger and Leveland. We had a new house in Whiteface that my parents had built. You know where Whiteface is.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people have ever heard of it unless you've worked for Apache.
Yeah.
But that's the first bust that I remember.
Yeah.
And there were millions of people in this country who went bankrupt, who lost everything they had. And I remember my mom and dad actually moved us out here to the Summerfield edition of Keller. So we lived in Fort Worth whenever I was a kid. I was 10 years old. We were out here 6 months. My dad cleaned carpets for a living. My mom stocked facial tissue for Kimberly-Clark. They did what every American family does, which is do whatever they have to do to provide for their family. We weren't the only one. There were millions. So I grew up in this industry. We were out here 6 months. My mom and dad missed the family in West Texas, so we moved back to the South Plains. And I think my dad worked about 1,083 hours a week in a hot oil truck just to keep us fed. We know what it's like to struggle. If you've been in this industry for any amount of time, you know that we go through booms and busts. Yeah. We saw that, of course, again in 2008. We saw it in 2015. And in 2015 is whenever OGWA was founded. I just wanted to really take up for the people who work in this industry. OGWA isn't a union, but we talk about the image that our industry gets in the minds of some people who have already set themselves against our industry is this big, evil, faceless, greedy, polluting, climate change causing industry. And that's just not who we are. You talked about how we truly are conservationists. I don't know any welder who wakes up in the morning and goes, I'd like to burn down some pasture. Nobody wakes up and sits to their coffee pot and goes, I wonder if I can make women fat with some air pollution. You know, and it sounds like a joke, but I read an article a couple months ago that said air pollution is making women fat. And I'm like, wow, I'm going to start blaming that because Southern Maid's been doing it for me.
Cow farts.
I haven't heard that one. I didn't, we need to let David Blackman know about those energy absurdities, shout out to him. But man, that's an absurdity right there if I've ever heard one. And I think we're just getting lazier as a people. Is why we're getting, a little bit bigger. God knows why I'm during the check here. I was looking at myself going, you know what? I can tell I have a 1-year-old, and I've been out in the field for the last 2 or 3 weeks doing a lot of work. And the first 2 weeks, Prater, I was breathing a little hard, and I'm like, oh man. And but hey, getting back after it, so can't complain there. But no, Oil and Gas Workers Association is not a union.
No,
but you guys are fighting for the oil and gas workers. So, and that's one of the best things I can really say about you guys. And that's the first thing I tell people whenever they ask me, well, what's the Oil and Gas Workers Association? Oh man, they're fighting for all the oil and gas workers out there. So what are y'all doing right now? And how are y'all putting up y'all's dukes, so to speak, metaphorically, to fight for the oil and gas workers here in Texas right now?
Sure. That's always the question. What does OGWA do? Right now, this session in Texas, we're working on multiple bills. One is House Bill 33, which was introduced by State Representative Brooks Landgraf from the Permian Basin. Yeah. And it's the Texas Energy Independence Act is the name of it. And there's been a companion bill filed in the Senate by Senator Springer now. Mm-hmm. That bill would prevent Texas state agencies from utilizing Texas taxpayers' fund to implement any overreaching federal regulations that hurt our oil and gas jobs. It's a great bill. I hope that everybody will get behind it. We are working it because it was introduced in the 87th session as well, but it died in the Senate. So we're working to get it all the way through the Senate this time and to Governor Abbott's desk for signature. Another bill that I think a lot of people need to pay attention to is Senate Bill 147, which was introduced by Senator Colkhorst. Okay. And that bans China and other foreign entities from buying land, but it's a good start. And so we've been working to add something to that, which is to ban China and all other foreign entities from buying, leasing, investing in any other way, taking control of our state's natural resources, be it oil, gas, minerals, water, and even further than that, investing in our infrastructure. Because, one way to keep it in the ground is to cut us off in infrastructure. Yeah. America needs control of America's natural resources.
Let's sort of dive into this China real quick, a little bit more about trying to ban them. I know for a fact that, China has reached out to other operators here in Texas about trying to, drill and let's produce this oil. And I've always been one thing I will say, one thing that nobody is against is the American dollar, the green, that's one color that everybody can agree with all the time. You show me the green, and you're my friend.
Sure.
And that is one thing, though, that I know at Pecos Country Operating that we have definitely not done. And you know what? I've officially never 100% been made an offer from a Chinese company to come drill with. And so I don't know how those guys feel. I just know, looking on the outside right now, of having very low talks with those type of individuals before, that it's like, is this something that I really want to do as a business, not only in the great state of Texas, but as an American, that others are going to come in and use up our resources and ultimately even try to have a say in what they're in what it is. And when it comes to their investments, they're expecting a minimum 30% annual guaranteed return on their investment. So for these companies that are actually signing on the dotted line to work with these companies, these Chinese companies, I don't understand that any form or fashion. So I'm glad to hear about these two bills, the Texas Energy Independence Act.
Yes.
And then the second one is what?
Senate Bill 147, which was introduced by Senator Colkhorst, doesn't have a common name, but it's getting a lot of air coverage right now.
Yes.
There are people in certain communities who are screaming racism. And I hope that those people will understand the intent of the legislation, that it is not to prohibit certain communities from owning small parcels of land. We're not trying to prohibit anyone from owning a home or owning a small ranch. But people who have fled oppressive communist regimes like the Communist Chinese Party certainly understand how bad that type of government is and what they can do to ruin a whole nation.
Now, one thing about the Oil and Gas Workers Association is that y'all are not just here in Texas. Y'all are in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and even California. Is that correct?
That's the only way I stay halfway thin, Ray, is no. Yes. So we've got members from over 33 states. I believe actually our members are from 35 states. California, we have some members that's going out there. Of course, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Kansas, Wyoming, Colorado. And the membership's growing everywhere. And it's good to see, because there are some days I think, man, is this worth it? And you talked about money. Why would anybody ever sign on that dotted line knowing that it was China, but China was on the other side?
Yeah.
It is worth it.
Yeah.
Fighting for American jobs and American workers is always worth it.
Man, you can. And there it is. That's the hook for this week right there. That's the crude truth right there. That, fighting for American jobs, for American workers is always worth it. And that's the crude truth. We could end it right there right now if we wanted to.
We could.
We're going to continue on. I want to continue on because I want to talk about really what's going on right now with this administration, supposedly trying to say they're going to put pressure on China. And let's talk about that a little bit. Let's stay with China here for a few minutes.
Sure.
Right, if that's all right. And what the OGWA is doing to I guess, watch this administration.
Right now we're actually having to pass a lot of stuff in state legislatures. Okay. We're not likely to get anything through at the federal level right now because we don't have control of the Senate. Pro-oil and gas people do not have control of the Senate. We certainly do not have control of the executive branch. So whether or not we have control of the House of Representatives, it doesn't matter because we're not getting much through unless we can retake the Senate with pro-oil and gas people and retake the executive branch with a pro-oil and gas president.
We gotta crawl before we walk, and we gotta walk before we run. And since the end of time, politics has never been a flip of a switch.
Right.
You know, it's not like 2008 where it says I got a phone and a pen.
Yeah,
we're not doing that.
It's a different time, and I know right now with this administration, they are supposedly trying to do something to ban China here in the United States as well, if I'm correct. And can you go into detail on that a little bit more, Matt?
So even more than trying to ban China, which a lot of state legislatures are doing at the federal level, the Biden administration is trying to put pressure on China to stop importing oil from Iran.
Yes, that's right.
And that's important, and it's great optics. The problem is that the Biden-Harris administration created all of the opportunities and the channels for China to continue importing oil from Iran and other sanctioned countries like Venezuela. This was happening during the Trump administration as well. Yeah. We all talk about ghost ships that change transponders at sea. And if you don't pay attention, if you don't know anything about what's been going on, if you don't read some of the articles, you're like, that sounds a little bit conspiracy theories.
Right.
It's a fact. Yeah. These ghost ships have been changing transponders at seas. And then China was importing oil from both Venezuela and Iran. China is also importing oil from Russia. Russian oil is going to Singapore and being reblended and repackaged and resold. And so what it comes down to is everybody wants cheap crude oil.
Yeah.
Our nation and other nations are powered by oil and natural gas. It's just a fact. And you can have these green fantasies all you want to, but the truth is we're nowhere near ready for those to even be feasible. They're not viable.
And cheap crude isn't just like, oh yeah, cheap gas, price at the pump. No, It's everything.
Yes.
It's your groceries. We can go down a rabbit hole. It's going to go all the way down to your property tax.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it
cheaper oil and gas is going to lower your standard of living.
Yeah. That's right. It benefits every American.
No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I always tout, I guess I need to watch some more documentaries, and anybody out there that got some, please send them over to me. But the one I like is Spoiled. And they talk about that. Hey, just flip it on the light switch. 9 times out of 10 takes oil or a coal or a natural gas to turn on that electricity. And that when we're cooking and that when we are driving our vehicle, it's not just the gasoline in the vehicle that gets us there. It's all the components of the tires. So yeah, no, again, we could definitely go down a rabbit hole with that. Matt, with the Oil and Gas Workers Association, when if an employee applies for a job somewhere and they say, "Oh man, I'm a member of the Oil and Gas Workers Association," what is something that the employer would be like, "Oh man, that's great"? Is there training that you guys provide? Is there anything else like that you guys are doing to really help out?
I know he asked you, addressed you on the issue, but since I'm am an employer of a
Go
job,
on, do it.
When I first told my boss, "Hey, I just made the board," what's that?
Yeah.
That's another reason why I wanted to get on this board.
Okay.
So bad to push this agenda. It's important. Like I said, I'm on the board of the AADE, the Permian Basin chapter, and I love that. I have a big passion for it. It's great for my job in networking.
Mm-hmm.
My belief, and obviously it's my belief, so I think I'm right.
Yeah, right. Of course.
But without this organization, the AADE, where do we stand?
Right.
We're fighting for that to exist.
Gotcha.
And it's not just a fight every 4 years. It's a fight every day.
That's true.
It's not just when when somebody like Joe Biden or another Democrat's in office. This is an everyday fight for us.
That's a good statement, and I'm glad you brought that up. So the last time I was in Long Beach, the CEO of one of the independent operators, he said, we always come to other people whenever there's a crisis. I said, the problem is that you don't understand every day is a crisis. When I founded this organization in 2015, it was in response to the Obama-Biden era weaponization of the EPA that really hurt U.S. producers, service companies, and cost a lot of Americans our jobs. I just wanted to remind the radical environmentalists in this country that it's American workers whose jobs you're willing to give to foreign countries with far less environmentally conscious standards because you somehow have been misinformed, that either you're about to die from climate change, but we need to pass new infrastructure bills, that oil and gas is bad. It's an education battle we face. And I talk a lot about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Okay.
It's not just a problem that she says dumb things. Yeah. On January 11th or 12th of 2019, she said, the world is going to end if we don't address the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. So we may be down to 8 years, right?
Yeah. No.
It's an agenda that she feeds to because it makes those climate people feel good.
Of course.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's what it's.
No, she's part of she's just a little head, talking head on for somebody else now, and no different than really this president. Unfortunately, look, at one time we had a senator named Joe Biden, and we had a vice president named Joe Biden, but this is not that same person.
It's not.
So that I do want to say, this is not the same guy that was vice president or a senator for 40 years. He is hurt. He is older now, and I think he is nothing more than a Manchurian candidate. That we have another group that's really doing things, and they have the bureaucracy in Washington D.C. because they always have a plan.
Sure.
And that plan always needs to go through no matter who's in what side, and that certain things have to go a certain way. Right now, I think what they're trying to do truly, in my opinion, is take the next big thing, because oil and gas has been the largest. Okay, it has created the most millionaires ever. Okay, now real estate has sustained the most millionaires. Okay, but oil and gas has created the most wealth, and it's something that the government cannot control. The electrical grid, moving things to a renewable, these pump stations that are electric, these are all things that these congressmen, congresswomen are all investing in today so that they can cash out in 20, 30, 40 years the way that the oil and gas industry has. That's just my own little conspiracy moment there. It's like, they're trying to wrangle the next big energy when it's the marketplace that has to dictate what the next big energy is going to be.
I'm glad you said that, because it was AOC's former chief of staff who said that the Green New Deal wasn't even originally about climate change. It was about how to overhaul the entire economy.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
Yes, he was quietly replaced a couple of months later, or maybe a few months later. I always want to be accurate. But he let that slip, that the Green New Deal wasn't even originally about climate change. It was about overhauling the entire economy. It was about replacing oil and gas, probably with their donors, because you and I know that every elected representative has somebody talking in their ear.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of talking in their ear, I want to get back to what your boss said about who, what, where is the Oil and Gas Workers Association. And what I want to point out on the show today is that, hey, man, they are lobbyist groups that y'all have people in, again, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, all over, and that you have a team fighting for us. And in fact, one of your biggest supporters right now is the governor of Ohio, if I'm correct. Is that
Mike
right?
DeWine.
Mike DeWine, yes. And that's one of your biggest supporters right now, which Ohio is obviously, Marcellus sells a big, pro oil and gas, depending on how many people go to the polls. But that's a very big oil and gas state as well.
Mike DeWine is the one who recently designated or signed the bill designating natural gas as green energy, and it should be. One state over, of course, in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, who has made some very anti-American oil and gas workers decisions, said on the campaign trail that he was going to do everything he could to produce Pennsylvania's natural gas. And that's the place that we need to get to in this country, that it's not a right thing. It's not a left thing. It's not a Republican thing. It's not a Democratic thing. Oil and gas jobs for Americans, and USA oil and gas production benefits every single American. You don't go to the pump and pay a different price because you're good looking. I don't go to the pump and pay less just because I wound up with a face for radio.
There you go. Hey, but you know what though? For everybody to say, I think everybody's glad to see the face of the Oil and Gas Workers Association. That's a good thing.
Well, I appreciate you having us on this morning. Again, whenever we look at revenue to state coffers, whenever we look at our GDP, in 2019, our vital industry supported 11.3 million jobs nationwide and 7.9% of our nation's GDP. That money goes to fund roads and schools, first responders, rainy day fund here in Texas. It goes to fund hospitals. It also keeps taxes low, and it keeps prices at the pump low for every American. It keeps home heating costs low. And it also keeps grocery prices low. During the first few months of Biden's administration, whenever he blamed inflation on energy prices, well, the counter to that is that if you believe energy prices are solely responsible for inflation, which we know they're not, but if they are in any way impacting inflation, why would you want high oil and gas prices? We need to drill here, drill now, or else we're going to have problems for years down the road. And it was John F. Kennedy who said, let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer, but the right answer. And the right answer for every American is to support USA oil and gas production.
There you go. Well, guys, again, I cannot thank y'all enough for coming and traveling to Fort Worth today to be on the Crude Truth. Prater, for everybody out there, how can they reach you? And if you want to just tell everybody how they can reach you.
You can reach me by email if you're looking to drill a well. Let me get you some pipe. It's my first name and last name, Prater.Benson, Benson @workstrings.com. Okay. You want my telephone number?
Man, whatever
right. It is. 214-864-5404. A lot of fours, easy to remember.
Okay. And Matt, how can people get a hold of you? How can they join and get behind this cause? Because again, I want people, that was why I invited you on and have continued to bug you to come onto the Crude Truth to get the word out there so that, Prater's boss and everybody else can know about the Oil and Gas Workers Association and how they are fighting for all of the guys that work with me, work for me, work around me, and everybody that works in Midland from here to Timbuktu. So how can they get a hold of you?
Sure. Our website is OGWAUSA.com. You can find us there. And if anybody has suggestions, because this organization is not some top down, we know everything. That's not the way it is. If you have some suggestions, if you see something that you'd like to add to it, please get in touch with us. And it's at OGWAUSA.com. You can join there. Individual and business memberships are available. But also, we want people to be informed about legislation in every state and at the federal level that impacts our jobs and families. Getting information to people is one of the best things we can do. I spent most of the last 11 years in trucking, and I know that whenever we're working 12, 14, 16 hours a day, that we don't always have the time and energy or the inclination to pay attention to every economic and geopolitical force that impacts our jobs and our families. I wanted some organization that every oil and gas worker could go, you know what? Those people actually understand us. Those people actually know what it's like to go paycheck to paycheck or to go through a bust and having bought dumb stuff and have those payments still left. I want somebody who's just like us. And so whenever we send somebody into a state house to testify to a committee, whenever we're talking about legislation, it's all of us. It's oil and gas workers. This is our organization. So if you see something needs to be done better or be done differently, please don't hesitate to contact us and say, hey, I was thinking about this. It's OGWAUSA.com.
Man, well, again, guys, thank y'all so much, Prater, Matt, for y'all coming on today onto the Crude Truth.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I feel like I'm on like USA Today or Good Morning America.
Hey, we like
it's a
our
beautiful studio, right?
is.
Beautiful. This is how you get all the big stars.
No. I'm
We're
very thankful for all. No, y'all look great. Thank y'all very much for coming on, and that's it on this episode of the Crude Truth. We'll see you next time.
This episode of The Crude Truth is brought to you by Complete Solids Control, Oil and Gas Workers Association, Sandstone Group, Air Compressor Solutions, Basin Fluids and the Fuel Pros, and Real News Communication Network.
The easiest way to start your own podcast and TV show? Real News Communications Network. Stand out from your competition. Produce streams of high-quality social media content. Become a thought leader in your industry. With RNCN, you get to be the host. We handle everything else. Tour one of our 3 locations in Dallas, Fort Worth, and the Colony. Call 972-402-6333 or visit launchashow.com to find out more.